I was listening to an old episode of Car Talk the other day, and the hosts read a piece of listener mail that asked a very interesting question. The question was, if you replace every part of your car, gradually over a number of years, until no original parts remain, would you still consider it to be the same car that you started with? The hosts were quick to relate this question back to the classic philosophical distinction between form and essence. If we assume that all the new parts are identical duplicates of the originals, we can say that the car's form remains the same, but is its essence retained? Does essence naturally follow form, or vice versa, or is their relationship more complicated? These questions struck me as particularly relevant to the adaptation of creative works, which, if you think about it, is a lot like rebuilding a car. It's about breaking down a work piece by piece, replicating the parts, and putting these new parts back together into something resembling the original. And the same questions about form and essence remain. For the sake of this discussion, we could consider the essence of a work to be its main goal or central holistic idea, and its form is all the decisions and specific points of execution that go into making the work. My favorite example of this adaptation process and how it can yield unexpected results is the adaptation of Iron Chef to Iron Chef America. Yeah, I know, they're cooking shows, right? We're not exactly talking about high art here, but just trust me on this one. There's a bigger point to be made here. For those who are unfamiliar with Iron Chef, it was a cooking show that aired in Japan throughout the 90s, and it was structured as a competition. Each episode, one challenger would engage in a contest with one of the show's Iron Chefs to see who could cook food that would be scored highest by a panel of judges. Each battle lasted 1 hour, and at the beginning of the battles a secret theme ingredient would be revealed that each chef would have to make the theme of their meals. If we look at all the elements of this show, its essence seems pretty clear. Iron Chef wanted to turn cooking into a spectator sport, and to give it the kind of sports broadcasting presentation you would see on ESPN, for example. Most of the show's creative decisions point directly to this goal. For example, let's look at the commentary. Iron Chef follows the tried-and-true sports broadcasting formula of pairing a play-by-play announcer with an analyst, sometimes called a color commentator. The play-by-play announcer provides a real-time summary of the action, directs the conversation, and asks questions to the analyst, who answers the questions, provides in-depth knowledge, and interprets the action for the layman at home. This is the commentary setup you would expect to see on almost any major televised sport. Here's an example of this commentary dynamic on Iron Chef.
All right, anyway, both men fully engaged from the get-go, and here's Yamada taking the cabbage leaves from the pot and icing them down.
Yeah, working on the color there.
Well, how do you do that?
If you dip it in cold water after lightly boiling them, the green color will stay. It'll be maintained.
All right, interesting.
Right.
It's particularly telling that Kenji Fukui, the original play-by-play announcer, and Bill Bickard, who provides his voice in the English dub, both have backgrounds not in cooking, but in sports announcing. Storylines are also an important part of any sports presentation. They give viewers a reason to get invested in the competition and its outcome, and this investment gives every moment a sense of tension and gravitas. The home team, the away team, the rivalries, the underdogs, the upsets. Iron Chef goes to great lengths to build these storylines. 2 to 3 minutes of every episode is devoted to introducing the challenger, who they are, what they're about, why they're competing, what a win would do for them. This chef, one of the only chefs in Japan who is trained in Mexico, is out to prove that the Japanese public's perception of Mexican food is wrong, and that authentic Mexican food can be just as sophisticated as any other kind of cuisine. This rising star lost his restaurants following a disastrous car accident. Now he's seeking to re-establish his national reputation after years of inactivity. The Iron Chefs have their own storylines as well. Iron Chef Chen Kenichi is seeking to make a name for himself and to step out of the shadow of his father, who was a legendary Chinese chef. In one episode, he is challenged by his father's top apprentice, the man who mentored him after his father died, in order to see if the student has truly surpassed the master. Iron Chef Masaharu Morimoto's radical, modern form of Japanese cooking makes him the target of a faction of hardline traditionalists who sends chef after chef into battle to try and take him down. A lot of the storylines came from the theme ingredient as well. The theme ingredient of this battle is yogurt, but yogurt isn't used in Chinese cooking. What is the Iron Chef Chinese going to do? Lastly, there's a sense of visceralness to the competition. Iron Chef not only has the attitude of a sport, it has the physicality of one as well. The 1-hour time limit requires the chefs to work at a breakneck pace, and the show never misses an opportunity to remind the audience of the toll the competition takes on the chefs.
20 minutes left. What was that? The Iron Chef?
How am I going to finish this?
Chan,
Oh, I'm just tired is what I am, you know?
look at him. He is sweating bullets over there. And his hat, sweat soaked around his forehead. Stainless steel pan, yes.
I think the pressure is getting to the challenger. He's mumbling again, saying it's all beginning to look the same. It all looks like pumpkin. It all tastes like pumpkin.
Many times, the cooking itself is physically challenging, requiring incredible feats of dexterity, or the occasional wrangling of a live octopus. So, all these elements paint a pretty good picture of cooking as a spectator sport. Now let's take a look at Iron Chef America, the adaptation for American television that debuted in 2005. It's a 1-hour cooking challenge. It's got Iron Chefs, challengers, theme ingredients, judges, a stadium, an eccentric chairman. It replicates the form of the original piece for piece, but the few small differences that do exist end up having a big impact on the show's essence. Let's look at the commentary. In Iron Chef America, the classic play-by-play and analyst duo has been replaced by an Alton Brown solo cast. While Alton Brown is a fantastic analyst, providing tons of expert knowledge and in-depth info, he's left trying to fill both the analyst and the play-by-play roles at the same time, and it doesn't always work that well. But more importantly, without the conventional commentary roles, the show loses a clear signal that intends to be seen as a sports presentation. One kind of funny addition to the show is that the chefs will sometimes join in and give play-by-play of their own cooking, but more often than not, it just deflates the tension.
Vanilla bean being opened up by Chef Ming Tsai on his board. Not sure which course it would be, but probably dessert.
Foie gras creme brulee.
Oh, you're making a foie gras creme brulee? Well, now I know what to expect. It's like the quarterback telling the camera he's going to fake the next field goal. The physical challenge is also a lot more understated in Iron Chef America. Challengers and Iron Chefs alike have spoken about the difficulty of the competition in various interviews outside the show, but the show itself seems to ignore or downplay their struggles. The lack of a post-match interview could be a contributing factor, but I think the bigger culprit is the rule change that chefs only have to plate one serving of each dish in the allotted hour, rather than all of them. The chefs then have an additional 45 minutes off camera to prepare their remaining servings. The show feels less frantic as a result. The chefs rarely seem to be worried about the time. It comes across as more of a showcase than a competition, a place for chefs to show off rather than put themselves to the test. But perhaps the most important thing Iron Chef America is missing is a sense of storytelling. The 2 to 3 minute introduction each challenger received in the original show is cut down here to a 10 to 15 second clip, just enough time to give the challenger's name, the name of their restaurant, and their style of cooking. This was presumably done to get to the battle quicker, but the side effect is that, aside from a few other television hosts and minor celebrities, the vast majority of challengers become faceless chefs of the week, forgotten as soon as the episode ends. We rarely hear why a challenger wants to compete, or even why the battle is taking place at all. Instead, we are told at the beginning of every episode that the chairman has commissioned the battle and determined the matchup for mysterious and unrevealed reasons. The Iron Chefs themselves don't have much in the way of personal storylines either. In fact, the show seems to assume that the audience is already familiar with the chefs, either as established Food Network celebrities or as winners of a series of reality competitions, and therefore they need no introduction. And this is true to an extent. I once had someone tell me that the only reason they watched Iron Chef America was to see Bobby Flay lose. They were only invested in the competition because they had an existing beef with one of the chefs. But meanwhile, casual viewers who may be unfamiliar with the personalities involved aren't given much of a reason to care. Now, to be fair, I should mention that Iron Chef America has made quite a few changes over the years, and it seems like a lot of these changes were intended to address some of the criticisms I just mentioned. For example, some new rules were added that bring some more urgency to the battle, like a requirement that the chefs serve their first dish to the judges at the 20-minute mark. They also brought back the old sequence from the original show where the challenger would call out which Iron Chef they want to battle. But I think the biggest change is that the impromptu chef commentary has been made an official part of the show, with the chefs narrating their own cooking for parts of the battle. This seems like a clever way to give us more face time with the challengers, so that they can become more than just faceless chefs of the week. But in the process, it takes the show even further away from the original sports casting style. The confessional, as it's called, that thing where someone sits in a room and talks to a camera about things that already happened, is a stylistic device most commonly associated with reality TV. Its use here sends the audience mixed signals about what kind of show they're watching. When I watch Iron Chef America, am I supposed to feel like I'm watching Monday Night Football or Big Brother? But the even bigger problem with this change is how it violates the linear narrative. While the chefs are narrating, we're shown clips of the finished dishes alongside footage of the chef preparing the dishes. This goes way beyond telling the audience you're going to fake the next field goal. It's like showing the fake field goal 3 downs before it actually happens. It baffles me how anyone could think that this type of out-of-order editing would be appropriate in a competition show where you're supposed to be in suspense about what happens next. Anyway, I don't think these changes ever had the potential to really address the fundamental difference between the two shows, which is a difference of goals. While the goal of the original show is to sell cooking as a spectator sport, the goal of Iron Chef America seems to have been just to copy the original Iron Chef. And with any adaptation, if the goal is just to copy the original work, then the adapted work is already starting from a very different objective. After all, the goal of the original work couldn't have been to copy itself. That would be a paradox. And when goals change, the decision-making process changes with it. Decisions that would have been counterproductive and irreconcilable with the original goal can be perfectly acceptable under the new goal. In this case, it doesn't really matter that the commentary doesn't resemble established sports conventions, just as long as there's commentary, like the original had. It doesn't matter that the competition is intense and compelling, just as long as there's a competition, like the original had. The result is a show that looks a lot like Iron Chef in form, but it doesn't have the same essence, which begs the question, what is the essence of Iron Chef America? What do you get when you take Iron Chef and remove the sports broadcasting flair and the emphasis on storylines? Well, you've still got some of the best chefs in the world making incredibly elaborate food from the finest ingredients. In other words, food porn. And while it's some of the best food porn around, we've traveled a long way from the realm of spectator sport. If we can say that Iron Chef America has the form of Iron Chef without its essence, then we can also ask, can a show have the essence of Iron Chef without its form? The answer might lie in another Food Network show called Chopped. It's a cooking competition with a different format, structure, and presentation, but it has some things that Iron Chef America lacks. A greater sense of physical challenge is achieved through the use of multiple, shorter rounds, an entire basket of required ingredients that have to be fit together almost like a puzzle, and contestants that are generally less experienced than the heavyweights that compete on Iron Chef America. Each of the 4 contestants is also given an introduction that's longer than what Iron Chef America gives its single challenger. The addition of a cash prize is a simple way to raise the stakes, and the chefs are normally asked what they would do with the money, or sometimes more generally why they're competing, what they're hoping to prove. It's not a lot of information, but it's enough to allow the audience to pick chefs to root for or against. In that sense, I think a strong argument could be made that Chopped is closer in essence to Iron Chef than Iron Chef America is. Another show that's interesting to compare to Iron Chef America is Iron Chef USA, the little-known first American adaptation of Iron Chef. It premiered in late 2001 on UPN of all places, with William Shatner as the chairman, if you can believe that. It only lasted for 2 episodes, but we can already see that this show took a different approach from Iron Chef America. It really played up the sports broadcasting elements. I mean, these guys look like they were pulled right out of ESPN. And it featured a larger, rowdier live audience, bringing the competition more in line with American sports culture. I think comparing the different approaches of these 2 American adaptations makes for an interesting example of not only artistic adaptation, but cultural adaptation as well. Getting back to the bigger picture, what this whole example tells us is that form and essence are not a package deal, and replicating one does not guarantee the other. The source material's form and essence are, first and foremost, goals to be achieved, and just by the nature of having multiple goals, they're never going to receive equal priority. The key is to recognize how each can be used to achieve the specific aims of the project. This video's already getting pretty long, so I'm not going to wade into any of the more popular adaptation debates, of which there tend to be a lot these days, but it's interesting to look at them through this lens. Did Chris Columbus prioritize form or essence? What about David Yates? For whatever it's worth, I don't think those questions have the same answer.